ask you now. Thank you.
Right. Good evening. Sorry we're getting a late start. Excuse me. First, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Planning and Zoning meeting for the City of Smyrna. Today is Monday, October 14th, 2019. It's 6 p.m. and at this time, we'd like to ask that all electronic devices be turned off as they interfere with our recording equipment.
I didn't quite catch that.
You hear that?
Could you please repeat it?
Apparently, I don't know how to turn off my own phone. For those of you joining us for the first time, this meeting is conducted much like a council meeting. As such, each application will include a presentation from city staff, followed by a question and answer session between staff and the board. Following staff's presentation, we'll have the applicant present their case and answer any questions. This is going to be fun. No, we're all right. Once all the questions have been satisfied, we'll have an opportunity for anyone in attendance that would like to come forward and speak in favor of or opposition to the application. We ask that you come forward one at a time, state your name and address for the record, and sign our sign-in sheet at the podium. Please direct all your comments to the board. The first item on our agenda is item 2019-230. This is zoning case Z19011. This item is to be tabled to the November 11th, 2019 Planning and Zoning Board meeting at the request of the applicant. Can I get a motion to table this item, please? We have a motion, Mr. Monroe, or second, Ms. Harrington. Please vote. Who are we missing? Oh. Good. All right. All right, so it's approved to be tabled 4-1. All right. The next item on our agenda is 2019-363. This is zoning request Z19-016. This item is to be tabled to the November 11th, 2019 Planning and Zoning Board meeting at the request of the applicant. Can I get a motion to table this item, please?
Can I say one thing?
Oh, yes.
This item of a public hearing, but the applicant is here, Mr. Grant Grimes, and he's at the back of the room. If anybody that's here for this item wants to talk to him about it, he's happy to talk to them and be able to give him their information. So
if there's anybody here for item 2, we can't let either come up and speak, but the owner applicant is in the back of the room and would be glad to meet with you and discuss the application. Okay, can we go ahead and table that item now? We got a motion, Mr. Bartlett, second, Mr. Monroe. Please vote. It's 5-0, I'm sorry. And is item 2019-364. This is a public hearing for the approval of a subdivision plat with variances for lot area and front setback. It's 0.46 acres in land lot 378. This is 2900 and 2930 South Cobb Drive. 2900 South Cobb Drive LLC is the applicant. Mr. Staubs, the background, please.
Good evening, Joey Staubs, Planner 2 with Community Development. This is a plat approval with variances. Applicant is 2900 South Cobb Drive. We have the presentation up there. It'll be heard tonight by the planning board and go to mayor and council next Monday, the 21st. This is the subject property, wrong address, 2900 South Cobb Drive. It's about 4.38 acres in Ward 5. It's a commercial retail strip with an out parcel. Existing zoning is general commercial. It'll stay general commercial. This is the subject property. This is the property line as it exists. This is the current setbacks for the property. This is the parcel that they want to subdivide. It's a separate tax parcel ID, has a separate address of 2930 South Cobb Drive. It functions independently and it has its own parking spaces, its own independent access drives. So they're just looking to formally plat this property. It does need 2 variances, reduction in the front setback from 50 to 40 feet, and then reduction in minimum lot area of 1 acre to 0.46 acres. It's pictures of the subject property. It's a Smoothie King, and then in the back is the retail center. These pictures across South Cobb and then down South Cobb Drive. Community Development's recommended approval of the proposed subdivision plat with the variances requested. And that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Staubs. Is the applicant present, please? Mr. Sams, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for welcoming members of the Planning Commission. For the record, my name is Garvis Sams, and I represent the applicant with a rather mundane name, 2900 South Cobb Drive, a corporate entity, but I do have its principal here tonight, Mr. Chris Pridgeon, who's sitting right back there. So between the two of us, we can respond to any questions or concerns you have either during or after my brief presentation. Mr. Staubs did a good job of teeing it up for you so you understand what the relevant facts are. We're in front of you for as he said, a plat approval. The property at issue is an out parcel of the overall shopping center, and the out parcel consists of 0.46 acres. The overall tract was purchased back in 2002 by Mr. Pridgeon and his corporate entity at the time. 3 years ago, they subdivided this 0.46 acre tract out to have Smoothie King as a tenant. Smoothie King has done extremely well at this site and is wanting to purchase it. So in essence, what we're asking for is for you to approve the manner in which this has operated over the past 3 years, the manner in which it's been taxed since the two parcels were identified, and then the manner of and facility with which there's interplay between the two parcels. We have, or I've given to the clerk who's handed out to you or distributed you a handout with a lot of different information. First of all is an aerial photo that gives you an idea of the positioning of the property, which Mr. Staubs has done. And then, of course, our site plan, which shows the overall tract and then the out parcel that's on the pin corner there at South Cobb and Plaza. And also, just so you'll know, and for your information, most plat approvals that you see are replete with a multiplicity of concurrent variances. Here, even though the GC zoning classification GC zoning classification requires a minimum of 20,000 square feet. This property is in the South Cobb corridor design district, so that pushes it up to an acre, which is 42,000 and some change. So that is the variance we're requesting, down to a little over what GC would require, right over 20,000 square feet, and then the front setback. This site, as I mentioned, has been taxed on its own. It's operated on its own rather successfully. It has the requisite parking of the city of Smyrna's parking ratios. It doesn't deplete or take away from any of the shopping center's parking. We have drafted, and it may be a little unusual or unique, but my client's given me the authority to share with you the legal document we created, which is a reciprocal easement agreement, which will ensure that we continue to have pedestrian connectivity, vehicular maneuverability, and accessibility between the two sites. And of course, that's a document that's going to also control ingress and egress and movements and interplay between the site. That is the mother site, the larger tract, and then this 0.46 acres. So we're really asking that you give approval for this site plan so it can stay status quo in terms of the manner in which it's been operating for 3 years. This is a matter that will go on to be heard by the mayor and council, contingent upon your approval and contingent upon what the mayor and council do. Will determine whether Smoothie King can become an operator owner as opposed to a tenant operator. The city staff, as Mr. Stobbs mentioned, is supportive of the application. We've met with staff on a number of occasions to ensure that we've responded to everything that Mr. Martin and his staff have put forward. In fact, we actually started conversations on this back when Mr. Sudworth was on board, but Mr. Martin has helped, along with his staff, put it together for you. So I know you've got a long agenda tonight, even with the two front cases coming off, so I'll stop there and respectfully request that you follow your staff's recommendation for approval. And Mr. Chairman, at appropriate time, can respond to any questions that you or Ms. Harrington or others may have.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Mr. Sams? Yeah. Ms. Harrington.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm delighted to see that Smoothie King's been doing so well in that location. It is a very busy location for them. Do you know if if Smoothie King has any intentions to give it a facelift and do some overall improvements to the outside, or are they going to just maintain the structure as is?
Right now, they're going to maintain the structure as is, Ms. Harrington, but there are plans that Mr. Pridgeon has with respect to, we've got the Napa, that's the central tenant of this, and
They left. They're gone.
yeah. But in any event, there's going to be an overall facelift, and that's one reason for the reciprocal easement agreement is to allow interplay or co-play between the two tracks.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Sams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, this time, this is a public hearing. We'd like to ask if there's anyone in attendance that would like to come forward and speak in favor of or opposition to this application. All right, let the record reflect there's no public comment. Any other discussion, concerns, comments? All right, then I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
I'd like a motion to approve. I'm sorry. 2019-364 public hearing for approval of subdivision plat and variances 0.46 acres at 2900 and 2930 South Cobb Drive.
We have a motion to approve, Ms. Harrington. We have a second, Mr. Monroe. Please vote. The application is approved 5-0. Good luck, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. All right. Before we go on to this next item, Rusty or Mr. Martin, there's an item in here. The next item calls for reference to the sidewalk bank. That is a later item on our agenda. Should we move it up to the front of this item, or are you comfortable that it can be done at mayor and council?
No, it's fine. It can be done in mayor and council. It's scheduled to go to mayor and council. The sidewalk bank amendment's scheduled to go October 21st, and this rezoning is scheduled to go November 18th. So if it gets adopted, then it'll be addressed prior to the rezoning
Okay.
being adopted.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, the next item on our agenda is 2019-362. This is zoning request Z19-015, rezoning from RD to R8 for the development of two subdivision lots at 4.35 units per acre. This is a 0.46 acre lot in land lot 593. This is known as 1540 Whitfield Street. The applicant is Alan Khalifi.
Yeah, this is rezoning case Z19-015, being heard tonight by the Planning and Zoning Board, and then Mayor and Council, November 18th. This is the subject property. As you said, it's about 0.46 acres. There's an existing duplex on it now. The applicant wants to demolish the duplex and build two new single-family detached homes. Existing zoning is RD, residential duplex, and proposed zoning is R8. It's the future land use map. It's medium high density residential, which allows up to 10 units per acre. Everything around it is the same land use. There's no change to the land use. This is the proposed site plan. As you can see, two single family lots, two detached houses. These are the R8 setbacks, 25 front, side 5, 25 rear, and those aren't changing from the standard R8 setbacks. This is where the rain gardens are proposed to go that will serve as stormwater detention. And these are proposed home elevations. This is the subject property. It's a duplex currently. These are pictures of the adjacent properties. And staff recommends approval of the rezoning from RD to R8 with for the development of two single-family units at a density of 4.35 units per acre with the following conditions. Composition of the homes will be made with a mixture of elements, no hardy plank on the front of the home. Utilities will be underground. They'll be responsible for any traffic improvements. No debris may be buried on any lots. The developer will comply with the city's current tree ordinance. All landscape plans must be prepared and stamped by our Georgia registered landscape architect. Yards will be sodded, and they'll comply with the required tree plantings. Also, they'll comply with the regular R8 standard setbacks. Minimum 22-foot driveway length. The right-of-way along Whitfield Street will be increased to 50 feet if deemed necessary by the city engineer. Also, the developer will donate a fee to the sidewalk bank in lieu of installation of curb, gutter, and sidewalk. And then all structures will be built to a maximum height of 35 feet. Additionally, they'll meet all the fire access requirements, water and sewer improvements, and responsible for stormwater improvements. Again, that's the proposed site plan, and we recommend approval with those conditions.
Any questions for Mr. Stobbs? Okay, thank you, sir. All right, we'd like to have the applicant come forward and tell us a little bit about your plan, please. Good evening and welcome.
Hello. I have been building in Smyrna for the last 25 years, and the last project I took was 2735 Old Concord. And this is going to be very similar.
Please state your name for the record, please.
Alan Khalifi.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all right.
So this is going to be an automated type of property, which is something that I've been building recently. It is going to be front with brick and stone veneer. 5 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms on the main level and 3 on the second floor, with a basement, unfinished basement. What else would you need to know about this property?
You've piqued my interest with automated.
Yeah, automated is basically you can control everything that the house have from your phone if you choose to.
Nice.
That's what automation is. This is a lot of folks now are looking into that because it makes things really easy to, you know, that's, so automation is still in need of, you know, either AT&T or, so, you know, it's not independent, but you still have to have that. The property will have a 8-foot ceiling in the basement, 10-foot ceiling in the main level, and 9-foot on the second floor.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Khalifi? Yes, sir.
What's the square footage of each of the properties, and
About
what's your price point?
3,400, 620,
And the price point for that?
620.
620. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, sir. This is a public hearing. At this time, we'd like to ask if there's anyone in attendance that would like to come forward and speak in favor of or opposition to this application. Please come forward one at a time and state your name and address for the record, and sign our sign-in sheet at the podium, and please direct all your comments to the board. It's a legal disclaimer. I've got to get all the way through it before I let anybody come up.
No problem. Blake Martin, 1528 Whitfield. We're the property immediately to the right of the proposed, I guess, change. Sorry, first time coming up doing this.
No worries.
We are in support of this. The one concern we have is the setback. Our home is set back at 45 feet. The home to the left of the property is also set back about 45 to 50 feet. The home to the other side is also 45 to 50 feet. For the continuity of the street and the look of it, instead of being set back at 27 feet, which is the plan, we would like it to be at 45. No clue if that even matters to anybody, quite frankly, because I know that I guess the zoning says 25. But for the look of the street, to try to prevent street parking, especially if you're going to require a sidewalk in front of this house, at some point maybe require one in front of mine. Whitfield Street is a pretty well-walked street with no sidewalks on either side, and everybody accessing the park, which is almost across the street from this property as well.
Right.
So we just ask that the setback be further back, since there's room in the back of the yard to go back.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Appreciate you coming up. If you've already signed it, you're fine.
Yeah.
Anybody else like to come forward and speak in favor of or opposition to this item? Okay. Any further discussion or comments? Mr. Martin, do you want to address the setback issue, or how would you like to handle that item with the request of, ironically, Mr. Martin to push it back? And I guess the other question would be, we could have the applicant come up and,
I mean, we can address that and have them push the house back, but there is if you look at that site plan, there's some pretty significant trees at the back of the property. So when you push the for the house is going to affect those trees. There's a 37-inch hardwood, and then some 14, 10-inch, 21-inch, 18-inch. So you start losing trees. You're already going to lose the ones along the western side just due to their placement, or their existing location.
right.
But, you know,
So it's a difficult situation anytime you're doing these smaller developments, that you're trying to balance out keeping as much of the canopy as possible with putting a house that the market will support.
yeah, I mean, and the issue too is if you go through Williams Park, you'll see some
It's-
houses are at 35, some are at 20, some are at 50. I mean, there's not a true defined streetscape as to how far the houses are set back from the road. The general trend within the neighborhood has been to have reduced front setbacks to about 25 feet. But that, that's also been with a rear entry product as well. So
Okay.
there's pros and cons either way.
And the other side of it is, Mr. Khalifi has worked in this community for a long time. I would encourage getting with him. You're going to be neighbors for at least a handful of months working through the project, and it's always a difficult thing. But I would encourage to create that conversation early on, and it'll help you both as you go through this process. Yeah, come on, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
You mentioned the trees on the west side of the property. Are you saying those are going to be gone?
We don't have a full tree protection plan, but based on where they're surveyed on this property, they're on his property.
So they'll be gone.
Yeah, because I mean that foundation of that house is going to be, I mean, especially on that 32-inch tree, is probably going to be right up to the tree trunk. So our goal as the city is not to transfer the burden of a hazardous tree onto adjoining property owners or to the person buying the house.
I hadn't read that in the application, so I saw them marked on there.
Yeah, so more than likely the trees along the western boundary right there are going to have to be addressed.
That will change the shade of my house quite a bit, but good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, but just keep in mind, he will be required to replant the site and meet the minimum density requirements and street tree requirements for the site.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Martin and Mr. Martin. All right. Any further discussion on this item? No. So I'd like to.
I move that we approve zoning request Z19015, rezoning from RD to R8 for the development, excuse me, of a two-lot subdivision at 4.35 units per acre, 0.46 acres, land lot 593 at 1540 Whitfield Street.
We have a motion to approve Mr. Monty Bai. We have a second by Mr. Earl Rice. Please vote. The application is approved 5-0. Good luck with your project, Mr. Khalifi. All right. The next item on our agenda is item 2019-357. 503 of the zoning ordinance pertaining to fencing requirements in the city of Smyrna. Mr. Martin, the background, please.
Yes, this is a proposed text amendment to the zoning ordinance to address fencing within the city's zoning ordinance. If y'all remember, probably a year ago, we brought a proposed text amendment that would consolidate the fencing requirements into one section and then address the street side requirements for corner lot, which would allow the fencing along the street side of a corner lot to have a 6-foot tall fence as opposed to the current requirement of 4 feet. That went up to mayor and council, and there was some opposition, so they pushed that item off and asked us to revisit the item. And they wanted us to consolidate the code and then provide for a provision to address the unfinished side of the fence. So that's why we're here today in front of you guys. As I stated, right now in the zoning ordinance, the requirements for fencing are found in different code sections. You have the definition, and then you have the second item for the front and street side yards found in section 501. So you have to move through multiple parts of the code to find all the requirements. With this proposed text amendment, we're going to consolidate that all into its own fencing requirement section. And in addition, we're going to propose that the finished side of the fence be outward facing or facing adjoining properties or adjoining public roads. And we have pictorial representations of what we're trying to get across in this text amendment. And as we go through the text amendment, you'll see what we're proposing. The first amendment is going to be to strike section 501.10. We're going to strike that from that section and then move it into a new section. The second amendment is to create the new section under 503-A fencing. The first section is the first subsection reads, no fence shall be more than 8 feet in height or be constructed in a public right-of-way. A2, in all cases, the finished side of the fence shall face adjoining properties and or public rights-of-way. For the purpose of this section, the finished side shall be defined as the side of the fence that contains no visible support structures unless approved by the community development director. And the difficulty is trying to define what is a finished side or a decorative side versus what is unfinished. And we tried to make that delineation based off the structural supports. We understand some fences are double-sided fences, so they can make that request to community development. We can review those fences, and if they have finished sides on both sides, then we'll go ahead and approve it in that manner. And then we have examples of what we mean by the finished side of a fence, and this will be included in the zoning ordinance. And then we also have examples of what the unfinished side of a fence looks like, and those are examples of what we mean. As I stated before, Section 501.10 was stricken from Section 501 and moved down to 503A.3. And basically, this is pretty much reads word per word. We added some additional materials in there to address new types of fencing. Within any front yard, and front yard should also include a corner lot which both yards abut a street, shall be deemed the front yard. In a zoning district, no chain link or similar woven wire fence shall be permitted. However, within a front yard in an aforementioned district, a decorative or ornamental rail, split rail, picket, opaque, basket weave, or similar fence constructed of wood, wooden, or vinyl materials may be permitted, provided that said fence does not exceed 4 feet in height. Columns comprised of brick, stone, or similar material may be placed between the fence sections in the front yard, but still cannot exceed 4 feet in height. Decorative wrought iron or black aluminum fencing shall also be permitted, provided the said fence does not exceed 4 feet in height. With that, we also provided examples of decorative fences that would be acceptable. This is not encapsulating all types of fences. This is just to give you an example of what the code is trying to explain. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. We're recommending approval of the proposed text amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any questions for Mr. Martin?
I got one quick question. With any fence that a homeowner would like to put in, they still have the opportunity to go for a variance
Yes,
and
sir.
request.
You always have the opportunity to request a waiver from the city's requirements, go through the License and Variance Board, through a public hearing.
Are we permitting fences?
No, we do not, we do not issue permits for the construction of a fence. So the applicant, or the homeowner can call and we'll provide them the information in the code sections related to the fencing. And it's up to them to make sure that they comply with the code. If not, and code enforcement gets called out there, then, you either have to correct the issue or seek a variance.
And this is one of those situations that a lot of times they don't find out till after the fact, which makes it a challenging, item.
Yeah, I mean, we try to provide information within this, and we'll also, when we get this adopted, put an info sheet on our webpage, so it's hopefully easily accessible to the residents, so they can understand what the code requirements are.
Right.
But yeah, ultimately, it's going to be on them to, either call us or find the information and make sure their fence builder's doing it in accordance with the
It'd be a
ordinance.
good thing to add the old water bill too. All right. Any questions? Any other questions or comments for
Mr. Martin?
Martin?
Can you tell us how much public input you've had and how long these changes have been out there for the public to see?
Well, we brought the original request a year ago. We didn't have any comment on that. But this is the first time this is going to the public for this iteration. And it's been advertised in the MDJ for the October 21st meeting for adoption by mayor and council.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. We're about to. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Ms. Harrington.
I have a quick question. Suppose a resident does put in a fence and they put the pretty side into their backyard. And what if they did it themselves, or what if they had a fence company and she goes, oh, just put this way? Then who's liable, and what are the fees or the fines?
Well, okay. I'm going to handle that in multiple portions. If we find a fence that's in violation, we'll issue a notice of violation. That's not a citation. That's just merely a letter saying you're in violation of this code section. Our goal is for compliance. We're not into citing people and trying to collect fines and fees and all that. So when we issue that notice of violation, we'll work with the property owner to come up with a date for compliance. So if they had a fence company do it and they wanted the fence company to do it back and they needed 2 weeks to be able to do that, 14 days, and we'll provide them 14 days, and then we'll come out and check the property at that point. If they're still working towards it and they need an extension, we'll consider that. As long as we see there's progress towards compliance, we'll keep doing that. If there's no progress towards compliance and we get past our checkpoints, then we will issue a citation and they'll have to go before the court to address the issue. But typically it's going to be the property owner that's going to be responsible.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And does this pertain to fences that are existing?
No.
Okay.
They will be grandfathered in. That'll be up for mayor and council, but I would assume something this simple that probably doesn't require a whole lot of change for staff and everybody else. It could go in the start of the next month, or it could be at the start of the year.
Push it off to all those new council members.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Martin. This is a public hearing. At this time, I'd like to ask if there's anyone in attendance that would like to come forward and speak in favor of or opposition to the fence item, which is good evening and welcome.
Good evening. I'm not here for the fencing, but just wanted to make an observation. I don't know much.
Can you
about
please
the-
state your name and address the
Sure.
record?
It's Sean Martin, and I live at 2884 Anderson Circle.
Did you say Martin?
Yes. So I'm the Mrs. of the Mr., the Mr., the Mrs.
Welcome, Miss Martin. Is everybody here named Martin tonight? Sorry. Go ahead. What's your
Yeah.
comment?
So I'm just curious to know. It's just a question. I don't support it, and I don't
Oppose it?
oppose it. But I would like to know, how do the fences, when you have neighbors, one of the things is, you put a nice ornamental fence down the middle of your property, and your neighbor actually doesn't really care for that design, but they want a 6-foot privacy wood fence that is, that's, to their choosing. Does the ordinance cover any type of neighbor, discussion, or, is this just something that'll just have to kind of work its way out in the private realm?
Well, I guess it really depends if you're located in an HOA or not. If you're in an HOA, typically you'll have fencing details and requirements and got to get approval from the HOA board. So that would be a form of neighborhood discussion regarding your fence. But if you're in one of the older neighborhoods, no, it's on the person's property. It's their, we have established regulations for fencing, and as long as they meet those requirements, and I guess the council feels that there's no need to have a discussion with your neighbors to how you want to improve your property.
Yeah. So the only other question I have relates to the wooden fence. So it sounds like, and I don't know what the code said before, but you can install a wooden fence up to 8 feet. And if it's an ornamental fence, then you can install that up to 4 feet.
If you're just a standard lot with houses on either side of you, from the front face of the house to the rear of the property, you're allowed up to 8 feet. From the front face of the house to the public right-of-way, you're limited to 4 feet. And on a corner lot, you're limited to 8 feet from the street side setback and the front setback to the rear, and then from the street side setback and the front setback to the roads, it's 4 feet.
Okay, thank you.
All right, cool.
Thanks for coming up. Any other input from the public? Okay. Any further discussion on fencing? All right. Then I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Mr. Bartlett.
I'll entertain a motion or propose a motion to approve the zoning code amendment in sections 501 and 503 of the zoning ordinance pertaining to fencing requirements.
So we have a motion to approve. We have a second. Ms. Harrington, please vote. The code amendment is changed 5-0, or is approved 5-0, not changed. Change comes next. All right. The next item on our agenda is 2019-358. This is a code amendment to the zoning ordinance to include wineries as permitted uses in the general commercial, light industrial, central business district, and mixed-use zoning districts. Mr. Martin, the background, please.
All right. you all will hear this tonight, have a public hearing, and then it'll go to mayor and council on the 21st. Looking back at my notes, it was almost a year ago that we did the amendments to include breweries and distilleries as uses within these zoning districts. And it went on in December, I think, to get approved by mayor and council. Since that time, we've had a gentleman that is looking to open up a winery, because that's what the state classifies him. He makes mead. He has an operation up in Marietta. He's looking to locate here in Smyrna. Since the state classifies him as a winery, which I guess a winery is up to, I believe, 26% alcohol by volume, which is over a brewery's capped at 14%. We thought it'd be beneficial to go ahead and add the winery as a permitted use within these categories to allow for the manufacturing of mead and wine and everything else. So I think we have everything covered in this sense now. I don't think we're going to be coming back to you, hopefully not, again to add something else, but we'll go through the requirements here. We reviewed the ordinance, and wineries are not listed as an identified permitted use within any zoning district in the city. Community development is proposing to add specific definitions to 401 related to what the definition of a winery is, the different types of wines that are identified by the state, and so forth. I think there's only like 5 definitions. Community development is proposing to add wineries as a permitted use under general commercial, light industrial, central business district, and mixed use. With the boom of craft brewing and winery and distillation and everything else, these types of uses aren't fully for distribution. They make their product on site, they do a package sale, and then they also have tasting rooms associated with that. And sometimes they'll even have a brew pub where they have a restaurant and they sell their product and all that. So that's why it's outside of probably just the light industrial classification you all would think it'd be appropriate in. With this amendment, we're also going to have to amend the city's alcoholic beverage license or beverage ordinance to address the licensing aspect of all this. The first amendment to section 402, we provide a definition of a dessert wine, and these are all definitions pulled directly from the state code. So these are not definitions created by staff or anybody within the city. These are the state limitations on these types of issues. So dessert wine is a wine having an alcoholic strength of more than 14% alcohol by volume, but not more than 24% alcohol by volume. Fortified wine is any alcoholic beverage containing not more than 24% alcohol by volume made from fruits, berries, or grapes, either by natural fermentation or by natural fermentation with brandy added. The term includes but not limited to brandy. Table wine, a wine having an alcoholic strength of not more than 14% alcohol by volume. Wine, any alcoholic beverage containing not more than 24% alcohol by volume made from fruits, berries, or grapes, either by natural fermentation or by natural fermentation with brandy added. The term includes but is not limited to all sparkling wines, champagnes, combinations of such beverages, vermouths, special natural wines, rectified wines, and the alike products. The term does not include cooking wine mixed with salt, and other ingredients so as to render it unfit for human consumption as a beverage. And finally, a winery is an establishment where wines are manufactured. So, as I stated, those are state definitions. Section 712, general commercial, just adding wineries to the list with breweries, distilleries, and brew pubs. And 714 is a light industrial zoning category. It's the same amendment. And then 716 is the central business district. It is the same amendment. And then 720 is adding wineries to the list of breweries, distilleries, and brew pubs. Same amendment as the three previous. Community Development has reviewed this. We're recommending approval of the amendment. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Any questions for Mr. Martin? Okay. Thank you, sir. At this time, we would like to see if anyone in attendance would like to come forward and speak in favor of or opposition to the code amendment to the zoning ordinance to include wineries as permitted uses in the general commercial, light industrial, central business. Okay. Any further discussion or comments? Okay. Well, I would like to entertain a motion. Doing a lot of entertaining up here tonight. I have a motion to approve, Ms. Harrington.
I'd like to make a motion to approve 2019-358 public hearing code amendment for the zoning ordinance to include wineries as permitted use in the general commercial, light industrial, central business district, and mixed use zoning districts.
We have a motion to approve, Ms. Harrington. We have a second by Mr. Monroe. Please vote. The code amendment has been approved 5-0 by the zoning board. Okay. The next item on our agenda is 2019-366. This is approval of a proposed code amendment to Chapter 90, the city's Code of Ordinances for the establishment of a sidewalk bank for alternative compliance to the city's sidewalk requirement. The City of Smyrna is the applicant. Mr. Martin.
This is going to travel the same path as the previous two amendments. The mayor and council on the 21st. Those meeting dates have been posted in the MDJ. Basically, the mayor and council has requested staff look at the opportunity to provide alternative compliance methods to the requirement of providing new sidewalks for new developments in the city. The installation of sidewalks is required for all new development, and it is found under several different sections of the city's ordinance. Sometimes the required sidewalks for these developments do not connect to existing sidewalks, or in areas where no sidewalks exist, or are cost prohibited to build due to the site topography and other environmental constraints, i.e. mature trees, stream buffers, stuff like that. The sidewalk bank would be an alternative means to compliance where the developer would pay a fee in lieu of installing the required sidewalk at the discretion of the Public Works Director. The funds would be set aside for future sidewalk construction or maintenance projects. These funds would be used solely for the construction of new sidewalks within the city limits or for the maintenance of existing sidewalks within the city limit. The fee amount would be based on a price per linear foot and would be established in the city's schedule of fees. During our research, Cobb County sets their fee at $76 per linear foot of sidewalk. These funds would be administered by the city's Public Works Director, and a quarterly report would be submitted to the city administrator showing the amounts collected, the amounts spent, and the location of the sidewalk improvements. Other jurisdictions, local jurisdictions already have established sidewalk banks where developers can pay fees in lieu of installing sidewalks. These jurisdictions include Cobb County, Peachtree City, East Point. There's many more. So we're just trying to provide an alternative means to compliance. With this requirement, we're proposing to add Article 4 to Section 90 of the Chapter 90, and that is to add a definition. Basically, a sidewalk bank means an account established and maintained by the Finance Department of the City of Smyrna of funds contributed from developers as a form of alternative compliance to the city's sidewalk requirements. Funds from the sidewalk bank are to be used solely for the construction of new sidewalks within the city limits or for the maintenance of existing sidewalks within the city limits as authorized by the Public Works Director. The sidewalk bank, Section 90-61 is the sidewalk bank program. Subsection 1, the sidewalk bank. As another method of compliance to the city's sidewalk requirements, the city will accept the fee in lieu of installation of the sidewalk. These funds will be used for the sole purpose of construction of new sidewalks within the city limits or for the maintenance of existing sidewalks within the city limits. The alternative compliance method may only be used when the public director determines the construction of the required sidewalks implausible or the nearest connection to an existing sidewalk is greater than 1,500 feet. Number 2, fund administration. The sidewalk bank will be administered by the Public Works Director. A quarterly report shall be submitted to the city administrator showing the amounts collected, amounts spent, and the location of the sidewalk improvements. Number 3, the fee amount. The fee shall be set annually by the city council and shall be posted in the city's fee schedule. The fees shall be assessed on a per linear foot basis equivalent to the linear footage of the sidewalk to be constructed or required. And then we're also proposing a sidewalk bank fee in the amount of $76 per linear foot of required sidewalk to be consistent with Cobb County. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Martin?
Under the current ordinance, the way it's set up today, if we have these unique situations or we have these infill developments where we've got to potentially have an island sidewalk or it's just not practical, the builder currently has a mechanism by which they could request a variance from could do that. So we have a mechanism to address this currently, do we not?
We tried to address it during the zoning when we're going through that and identifying when they need sidewalks and when they don't. And typically we've been addressing that as if they don't need sidewalks, then we're not requiring it at that point.
And so then we would have a variance.
But sometimes you run into issues where stuff is not shown on a survey or you run into, site constraints that may prohibit a sidewalk. And this would provide that opportunity to address that. I would imagine moving forward, you'll probably see a lot of cases where if one is not required on their side of the street and there's one on the existing side of the street, they may have to be required to pay into the bank.
I got one quick question. At $76 per linear foot, what's the width of the city sidewalk? At 4 feet?
5 feet
5 feet.
for a public sidewalk.
Mr. Bye.
But that, just keep in mind, you also have to address land acquisition, construction easement acquisition, stuff that the developer wouldn't have to accommodate if they were building it on their site because that's, their property and they have the ability to do that for cheap.
Mr. Martin, is there any guidance to the Public Works Director about how to make these decisions? Because if all of the money from the land bank is going from Ward 3 and 5, and nobody's building sidewalks, but Ward 7, aren't we setting him up for a lot of headaches?
The city has a sidewalk plan right now, and they have priorities within that sidewalk plan to address connections to schools and parks. I would imagine the next phase of that would be addressing specific areas to address. But yeah, I mean, that's a potential conflict that mayor and council is going to have to probably work out when they go to adopt this, is establishing a policy as to how the money is going to be spent. The issue is if you say, you know, you have to spend money equally amongst the wards, you have 7 wards, and you may not ever accumulate enough money until 10, 15 years down the road to do a sidewalk project. So I envision this as being something the mayor, the Public Works Director can administer the account. I would assume the Public Works Director would probably go to mayor and council and say, we're going to spend this money here to either subsidize this project we're already doing or to do a new project in this specific location and have them approve it. I mean, when we plant new trees and have a big project like Concord Linear Park and stuff with the tree bank money, we send that to mayor and council for approval.
Yeah, you just said that the sidewalk's 5 foot wide. I thought I read somewhere that it's 4 foot wide in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay. This doesn't.
On private streets in some areas, it's 4 foot.
Okay. Okay.
But if you go through zoning, which 90% of our new developments go through, Section 1201 requires a 5 foot sidewalk.
5 foot. Okay. Any other discussion?
Quick other note. Do you have metrics from the other communities that have a similar program that says that this is a worthwhile program? Or
no, I can contact them and see what they have to say. I'm sort of torn on it because, I see the pitfalls that could happen with it, and I've acknowledged that to mayor and council.
well,
But
it seems
they-
redundant. If we're already addressing it through a variance process, now we're trying to collect
Yes.
Yeah,
on.
but the
It's
thing you
another fee.
have to realize is when we're going through zoning, we're looking at, is it a local street? What type of street it is?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are the existing conditions out there? So sometimes there's an existing sidewalk on a local street that's across the road, which if it's a local street, it's a residential street, you can have just a sidewalk on one side of the road. So that sidewalk may not be required at that point, and that would be something we would handle at zoning. But sometimes you run into an issue of when you get out there, there's a large tree that you're trying to preserve or something that doesn't show up on the survey that you didn't address during zoning. And if you don't want to put that sidewalk in and we want to try to preserve those trees, and this isn't an alternative method for them to be able to pay for the sidewalk elsewhere in the city and save those trees. If you just say waive the requirement, then they just save the trees and there's no sidewalk. And I think what mayor and council is intending is try to keep things fair amongst the developers. And if we're requiring it for one, we need to require it for all, whether that's on their site or somewhere else.
That's fair. That's a fair point. Are we getting rid of the variance process if, say, so you're saying there's 2 alternatives. There's two items. You can put in a sidewalk,
Right.
or you can pay into a bank. Whereas now we say you put in a sidewalk or you ask for a variance.
Well, yes. It's not put in a sidewalk or paying to the bank. It's put in the sidewalk and request to pay into the bank, and then the Public Works Director makes a determination. If they don't, they're gonna be required to put the sidewalk in.
It's an either or on this situation.
They're not, yeah, they're not gonna get a waiver from the requirement. They're gonna have to, you're either gonna build the sidewalk or you're paying into the bank. Either way, you're gonna provide sidewalk at some point, either on your site or at an alternate site. But your point's well taken, yes. We typically try to resolve those at time of zoning to make sure that, we address those things.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Martin. This is a public hearing. We'd like to ask if there's anyone in attendance that would like to come forward and speak in favor of or opposition to this proposed code amendment change. Come on down, Mr. Martin. This is easy when they're all named Martin.
Can I sign this again?
No. Just state your name again for the record.
Blake
please.
Martin.
Welcome back.
Thank you. 1520 Whitfield Street. I guess for me, it kind of sounds like a tax. If you're a developer right now, if there's no sidewalk that's needed there, then you get the variance and you're paying nothing. Now the solution is going to be, nope, you have to pay in the tax. If that's the case, they pay the tax, whatever. I'm not a developer, I'm not building homes. But to me, it sounds like a tax. That becomes mandatory as opposed to something that's you might get a variance for. The other part of it, if you're going to make it say only pay for new construction versus new construction and maintenance, I would say new construction only, because maintenance definitely just becomes really a tax. I mean, if the point of the city ordinance is to add sidewalks throughout the rest of the city, then why not make the focus be on new sidewalks? If it just goes into a general fund that improves sidewalks or repair sidewalks, it's basically a tax.
Exactly what it is. And I'll tell you this, these items at the bottom of this agenda are the most important things that we hear up here, because it changes in perpetuity what we do in our city. And I appreciate you paying attention to that and hanging out and having comment on it, because that's exactly what it is. It's a tax. I do build and develop in this community, and I do my best to protect every neighbor, every tree, everything I can do. But this, I would like to see this a little more specific. I would like to see this have, I agree that it should be for new construction. And I would like to see it, I guess, I don't want to say more thought out, because I know staff does an excellent job of putting time and energy into crafting these things. But I just think there needs to be more to this item. And I would like to see it be specific to eliminating the islands of sidewalks we have throughout this city. I can walk you through tons of addresses. I'll spare everybody of that sidewalk starts and stops at the boundary on the property where developers have come in, and it's a sidewalk to nowhere. We've talked about this many times. And I would like to see this be something that was specific to remedying that issue and not just overlaying another fee or tax, however you look at it, on people in this community, because it scares me the more we layer these things up, the less likely we're going to have people that want to engage smart growth in our community. That's all I'm saying about that. Thank you, Mr. Martin, for your comments. Any other comments?
The code directly says if it's not within 1,500 feet, then you have the option of paying the sidewalk bank. So it is an opportunity to eliminate sidewalks that don't go anywhere and hold that person that's building new development somewhere to the same standard that the other people that may have a connection to existing sidewalks be required to pay. The reason we put the maintenance requirements in is because we have a ton of old sidewalks that aren't in compliance, one, or two, don't provide ADA access for people to be able to get onto them. So this would be a means for somebody to address, for the Public Works Director to address, to provide handicap access with new ramps and new stuff to existing sidewalks that are there that wouldn't be a new project. You know, I completely understand where y'all are coming from and where your concerns are. You know, I think what mayor and council is trying to do is provide an additional opportunity to address things and then hold everybody to the same standards. I'll be happy to look at any issues you guys want to address, or I can note them and take them to mayor and council and see how they want to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. And Mr. Martin, I'd encourage you to attend the 1021 mayor and council hearing. All right. Any further discussion? Okay. Oh, yeah, come on. Hold on, Ms. Martin. State your name
I was
again.
trying to hold my silence, but I couldn't. Another issue that
Please state your name again for the record. I'm sorry to be.
Sean Martin,
Thank
and
you.
I reside at 2884 Anderson Circle.
Thank you.
Okay, so with the sidewalk issue, there is a huge safety concern as it relates to streets and sidewalks and people traversing from place to place as our communities get more walkable. Although I do agree it is probably considered a tax, it is definitely, to me, something that our developers, when they come into our communities, they should buy into it. This is how communities are developed. And when they grow with us, I think that's a great partnership. That's it.
Well said, Ms. Martin. Thank you for your time. All right. I'd like to entertain a motion. Motion, Mr. By.
Yeah, given we already have a mechanism in place to address this through a variance process, and given the fact that the areas that are typically affected by this are our more mature neighborhoods, and the money goes into a pool, that money, I suspect, will not end up in the mature neighborhoods. That might be lower income type areas. I believe we have a mechanism to already address this. We don't need to make it easier for builders not to put in sidewalks. We need to make it easier. We need to have more sidewalks. We need to have more connected communities. And for that reason, I motion that we deny 20196-366 public hearing approval of a proposed code amendments to Chapter 90 of the city's Code of Ordinance for the establishment of a sidewalk bank for the alternative compliance to the city's sidewalk requirements, City of Smyrna.
We have a motion to deny. I need somebody to edit that on my screen. Do we have a second? We have a second. Mr. Rice, please vote. The motion to deny has passed 5-0, if I've read that correctly, but it jumped off my screen pretty quick. But that is correct. Motion to deny 5-0. Thank you. All right. The next item on our agenda is Ordinance 2019-18. It's a public hearing for a code amendment to the city's tree ordinance. Chapter 106, Vegetation. City of Smyrna, Mr. Martin. The background, please.
The next item is code revision to the city's tree ordinance. And this is, as you'll see, I'll walk you through this. This is something that was initiated by the Smyrna Tree Board. We established a tree revision committee and basically spent a year on this revision with the tree board, which has representation from every district and the development community and staff and a consultant landscape architect. The tree committee was made up of 7 voting members. We had 3 members from the tree board, Kate Connor, the chairwoman, Harrison Akins from Ward 1, and Jean Mankey from Ward 6. We had 2 developers. We had Brad Thompson from Price McLean Homes and Chris Poston from Trayton Homes. And then 2 members from the city staff. That was Ken Sudreth and myself. Other key contributors were Joey Stobbs, Planner 2, Caitlin Crow, Planner 1, Bill Caldwell, the landscape architect, who was project consultant, Robert Bredschneider, our city arborist and project consultant, and then Robin Phillips was our Ward 3 alternate for the tree board. Just to give you an idea of all our meeting dates and who met and what was discussed, these are all the dates and all the meetings. We had 26 total meetings. We had 12 with the Tree Ordinance Review Committee on its own, and we spent probably 2 to 2.5 hours per meeting going over every aspect of this ordinance and discussing all the different scenarios and how they may play out, how they may affect how they can be enforced and administered, and how they may affect the community as a whole. I'm just going to run through some of the most discussed topics and some of the issues that we had pretty in-depth conversations on. Our first order of business was to compare our city to other cities and other tree ordinances that the tree board thought were pretty substantial ordinances and sort of want to try to emulate. We looked at Alpharetta, Atlanta, Sandy Springs, Marietta, and a few others. The next major discussion was how did we want to calculate site density. Some ordinances do that through counting the inches of tree trunks on a site versus the percentage of canopy coverage of the site. Our ordinance does it via counting the number of inches per acre. And with that discussion, we decided to maintain the existing way that we count our density. Another big issue that we discussed, and we spent probably 6 of those 12 meetings having some form of discussion on this issue, was applying the ordinance to single-family residential lots and duplex lots. The city's current ordinance exempts single-family residential lots and duplex lots from the requirements of the ordinance if there's no development permit on site, or if there's a development permit on site and there's less than 50% disturbance on that site. So what that means is you have the total acreage of the site, that the developer identifies the limits of disturbance, and if that disturbance exceeds 50% of the site acreage, then they're required to meet the code. If it doesn't, then they are exempt from the code. And then the next major policy change was applying the ordinance or requiring a tree removal permit to properties without a development permit. So, and that basically centered around the removal of larger trees. So as you'll see in the ordinance, we'll discuss this further. If you now remove a tree over 24 inches in diameter, and that's measured at DBH, you'll be required to come in and pull a tree removal permit, whether or not you have a development permit on site, which is a significant policy change. We finally got to the point where we were going around and around and around with these discussions, and we ultimately got to the question of what is the ultimate goal of the revisions? And the question was basically, are we concentrating on preserving existing trees or adding to the canopy? And I think the overwhelming sentiment was they wanted to provide opportunities to save existing trees and maintain the existing canopy that's there. And we did that through eliminating or reducing some requirements that may push developers to remove trees versus saving them. And that's related to critical root zone size or the requirement of tree prescriptions as opposed to bonding for trees. When we started the process, we identified the items that the Smyrna Tree Board wanted to address with this ordinance revisions. And they're listed there. Number one is the single-family duplex lot exemptions from the tree ordinance. Number two, boundary tree definitions and requirements. Number three, specimen trees and specimen trees stand in historically significant tree definitions and requirements. Number four was the minimum tree density requirements. Number five is the maximum specimen tree recompense requirements. And number six are the fees related to tree removal. In those discussions, community development staff identified their items that we thought needed to be addressed. The first being maximum specimen tree recompense requirements, required single-family building permits to meet the requirements of the tree ordinance, reduction of the critical root zone, requirement to preserve specimen trees, for improved tree care and maintenance prescriptions for trees with critical root zone encroachments. 5, improved tree planting requirements for residential lots and buffers. And 6, update technical standards in the tree ordinance. As you can see, the tree board their issues mainly dealt with policy changes, and the staff mainly dealt with technical changes. Some of our items overlap and they sort of address the same things, and some of them don't. Some of the areas where we overlap were single-family lot exemptions and requirements for single-family building permits. We both wanted to address specimen tree recompense requirements. And then we wanted to deal with specimen tree requirements and boundary tree requirements as well. So one of the first changes that we were to look at is the section on who the ordinance applies to. Currently, the ordinance applies to all properties with a development permit and exempts existing single-family duplex lots and duplex lots with less than 50% lot disturbance. The proposed ordinance would apply to all properties with a development permit and exempts single-family and duplex lots with development permits for building additions and accessory structures. So we eliminated the 50% metric and basically said if you're constructing a new home, you have to get, you have to meet the requirements of the ordinance. And if you're just building an accessory structure or a addition, then you need to, then you're going to be exempt from the requirements. The next issue was tree removal permits. Moving from an ordinance centered on development activity and permits to requiring tree removal permits for trees 24 inches in size on all properties regardless if a development permit has been issued. And the next 4 bullet points deal with what that encompasses. A tree removal permit is required to remove any living tree with a DBH of 24 inches or greater on property with no development activity. Number 2, the replacement is required with either a minimum 2-inch caliber tree of comparable species or genus, or by paying recompense equal to the size of the removed tree based on the current fee schedule. So the city has a tree bank currently in place. So if you can't replant the site accordingly, you can pay into the tree bank. And that's 140 inches per acre. I've provided you what that recompense for a 24-inch tree would be, and it comes out to about $3,300. Number 3, replacement tree must be planted within 60 days of removal unless otherwise approved by community development director. And that's basically to address timing. If we're in the middle of summer and it's June and they take down a tree, I don't think it's right to require somebody to plant a tree back by July and then that tree not have a good opportunity of survivability, and then they got to go buy another tree to replace it. If I go back to the second bullet point, you can see there's a clear disparity between planting a tree and paying into the recompense. The goal there is to direct the people to plant a new tree on site. So you can either plant a new tree for $280 or you can pay $3,360 into the tree bank. And we went round and around about that, trying to figure out what is equitable and what's right. But ultimately the committee voted, and I think it was split, and this is what it came out to be. And finally, the last bullet is if you remove a tree without a permit, then you're paying triple the recompense. So you're either planting 3 2-inch caliber trees, or you're paying triple into the tree bank. I wrote up a little scenario here to see what the true cost to residents if they decide to take down a 24-inch tree that's living and in good shape. And these are really conservative numbers. I mean, it's probably more than this at this point, but I tried to be conservative and be as fair as possible. Under the current ordinance, if you were a single-family home and you wanted to remove a tree, depending on the location of the tree and how big it is and all that other stuff, and I'm sure I'm way undervalued of what it probably may cost to remove some of these larger trees. It could be between $750 and $2,000. Under our current ordinance, there's no required permit, so there's no permit fee, and then there's no required recompense. So under the current ordinance, your cost is the removal cost of the tree. Under the proposed changes, keeping the removal costs the same in that it's a 24-inch tree, would require a tree removal permit. I'm proposing a permit fee of $100 to recoup our arborist fees for going out, inspecting the site, inspecting the tree, and then inspecting the planting of the new tree. So basically $50 a trip out there, which probably is not going to cover the full cost of having the arborist involved in that process. The tree removal costs remain the same. The recompense of a 2-inch caliber tree, and I just based that, to be fair, off the Smyrna Tree Bank of $140 an inch. So to plant that tree at $280, and then so now your total cost, if you remove that tree and replant with a 2-inch caliber tree, goes up from, on the low end, from $750 to $1,100, on the high end, $200 to $380. So you're looking at a net impact of $380 to remove a tree that's 24 inches or larger now. With this requirement, or with these changes, we changed some of the definitions. There's a ton of definitions we changed. You guys have those. I'm just going to go over the major ones that affect the ordinance pretty substantially. Critical root zone, we changed the formula from 1.5 feet per inch of DBH down to 1 inch or 1 foot per DBH. So, you know, you're looking at under the current ordinance of 1.5 feet per inch of DBH. If it's a 20-inch tree, you're looking at a 30-foot critical root zone. Now you're looking at, if it's a 20-inch tree, it's a 20-inch critical root zone. Or 20-foot, I'm sorry. So, which is significant because when you have those critical root zone encroachments, which in the development patterns that we're doing, there are going to be encroachments in the critical root zone, that you have to either, under the current ordinance, you have to bond and provide tree prescriptions. And I'll get into this as we go on, we eliminated the bonding requirements because it's too hard for developers and for citizens or anybody to get a bond on a tree. It just doesn't make sense. So we lowered the critical root zone, created bigger buildable areas on the lots, and then eliminated bonding requirements in exchange for tree care prescriptions. So the developer, instead of investing that money into ensuring that the tree is going to survive, they go ahead and invest that money and take care of the tree on the front end at pre-construction when they're putting in the silt fence or clipping the roots and doing whatever the arborist prescribed measures are going to be. Boundary trees, we tied the boundary tree definition to specimen tree. So under the current ordinance, it was at 24 inches. Now it's based on the definition of a tree, or a specimen tree, which is based off the species of tree. So your ornamental trees are at 10 inches. Your coniferous trees are at 20 inches, and your overstory trees are at 24, and your pines are at 36. Development activity, we clarified what development activity means. Overstory tree, we shifted the definition from a definition based on tree height to a definition based on canopy coverage, because the current requirement for overstory tree is a minimum 40 feet in height. Well, you can have a screening tree that's 40 feet in height. It's narrow and it doesn't provide any tree canopy, and it's used as screening. This is going to be required. You have a canopy that extends out and covers a minimum amount of side area. And then we added a definition of qualified professionals. And this was added to increase the number of certified professions allowed to provide tree plans, tree assessments, and prescriptions. So a lot of items within our ordinance require an ISA certified arborist to do. This will provide an opportunity for certified arborists, certified foresters, and other professionals to provide plans. So there's opportunity beyond just one identified profession. Specimen tree requirements. We modified the size, species, categories to address all species and consolidate some of the categories. The 20-inch category was added, and the 30-inch category under the current ordinance was eliminated, and those species were added to the 24-inch category. Under the current ordinance, it's pretty much established this same way with the species groups and everything else, sort of in the same manner. We just clarified and added more additional species, and then added the language about overstory trees and other ecologically similar trees for trees that we may have missed. So with this, your 10-inch ornamental tree or your small trees, so you got your cherries, persimmons, dogwoods, fringe, those types of trees are considered specimen trees when they exceed 10 inches or more. Your 20-inch coniferous trees will be your arborvitae, your screening trees, your bald cypress, cedar, china fir, eastern hemlock, and red cedar. 24-inch caliper trees are going to be your overstory trees, so that's going to be your ash, beech, birch, black gum, elm, ginkgo, hickory, oak, pecan, poplar, red, and sugar maple, magnolia, spruce, and sweet gum. And then your 36-inch is going to be your pines. And for the most part, those are similar to what the way it's set up today. Some of those that are in the 24-inch were in a 30-inch category, but we wanted to just consolidate it and make it a little bit easier. Health criteria was removed from the existing requirements. There were like 5 or 6 requirements. Had to have 15 years of life and all stuff that's sort of subjective. We eliminated those requirements and just said a tree that's classified under ISA requirements as hazardous, dead, dying, or disease could not be considered a specimen tree. So the way this works is when you go to do your development and you submit for permitting, you're going to submit a tree survey, a tree protection plan, and a tree replacement plan. As part of the tree survey, you're going to provide an assessment of the specimen trees. So all the trees that exceed the requirements above are going to be identified as specimen trees, and then a certified arborist or forester or whatever is going to say, this is a specimen tree, it's in good health, or this is not a specimen tree because it's in bad health, or it's dead, dying, or declining. And they'll go from there. If it is in good health, you're going to have to recompense the tree, which means you pay inch per inch replacement over the density of the site per that tree. If it's in bad health or dead or dying, it doesn't count against you. So you just remove it, and there's no penalty for that. Specimen tree requirements. Existing specimen trees may count towards the minimum density requirements if no disturbance occurs within the specimen tree's root plate. So we have two zones. We have the critical root zone, which is the feeder system for the tree, and then we have the structural root plate, which is what holds the tree up. So as long as you're only encroaching into the critical root zone, you may be allowed to count that tree towards your density requirements, provided you get approval from community development. if you impact the structural root plate, we consider that tree a hazardous tree and needs to be removed. The next sentence of that is a developer may encroach in the critical root zone of a specimen tree and may count towards minimum density requirements at the discretion of community development director. The developer must provide the following information to the Department of Community Development prior to seeking approval to encroach. So when they submit their tree plans for their development plans, if they identify they're going to encroach into the critical root zone of a tree and they want that tree to count towards the density for the site, they need to provide, one, a tree protection plan showing the type of encroachment and the amount of encroachment on a critical root zone. Two, a letter from a qualified professional reporting on the health of the tree. And three, a prepaid tree care prescription plan. And that'll list the remedies to mitigate the impacts on that tree during development. And this is important because this is going to be the requirement in place of bonding the tree. Because right now, if you wanted that tree to count towards your density, you would have to get a bond equivalent to the removal cost of the tree and then the replacement cost of the tree, which is tough to get at this point because you have to do a ton of underwriting for development bonds. And then at the end, the elimination of the requirement for tree bonding in exchange for a prepaid prescription plan to be implemented during site development and construction. Basically, insurance versus investment. Specimen tree recompense. The current ordinance caps specimen tree recompense to 100 inches per project, which disproportionately impacts smaller projects. 100 inches could be really 3 30-inch, 35-inch trees, and you can hit that pretty easy on a site. You already saw one site today that had 2 30-inch trees on it that was only a half acre in size. So a developer on a site that small would have to recompense the full 100 inches if they met it, which is disproportionate to somebody that may have an 8-acre site that may have 20 specimen trees that only has to recompense 100 inches. So they can spread that across their house, across their development, and it's a lot easier for them. The proposed ordinance changes that specimen recompense to 50 inches per acre. So we're bringing down that limit for smaller lots, but we're expanding it. They're going to have to pay it for every acre of development for the larger sites. The proposed ordinance currently requires 4-inch caliber overstory trees as a form of recompense. We have added the ability to use 3-inch understory trees if we're running into utilities and stuff like that to meet site requirements. The current ordinance has a pretty stiff penalty clause in it. It requires punishment of a $1,000 fine, payment of $100 per inch of damaged tree, and a replanting of 6-inch caliber trees. I mean, that's hefty. The proposed ordinance, we want to take that back to the standard penalties associated with ordinance violations. So that's a maximum $1,000 fine with up to 6 months in jail. That never happens, but that's just the standard language for every other code violation in the city. And that's at the request of the city attorney. He made that a while ago, and that we're trying to incorporate into this revision. Tree planting requirements. All single-family or duplex lots shall provide the following at the time of certificate of occupancy: minimum of 12 inches per lot at a ratio of not less than 1 overstory tree per 3 understory trees. If you meet your site for density requirements with existing trees, you're not going to have to do this. If you're planting your site back, you're going to have to plant these trees. And the issues we were running into was when you have, say you have a 3-acre development, they're able to save trees on the front end of the site and meet most of their density requirements and just plant street trees for the remaining 10 or 12 lots. And those were the only trees that were left on the back 7 lots, and there was no other trees on that site. This allows or requires the developer to spread the tree replacements out onto all the lots and not just consolidate them to buffer areas or screening around the detention facility. We clarified where street trees need to be located. They can be in the right of way, behind the sidewalk. If they need to go in the public or private property, they can as well. And then we upped the caliper inches of the overstory trees and the understory trees to 4 inches for overstory and understory for overstory and 3 inches for understory. And the planting area must have a minimum width of 8 feet to have enough planting area. The technical standards, we updated those. We improved the example of the density calculation to include the net site area calculation. We provided recommendations for planning and design phases. So we identify the standards that you guys need to address when you're thinking about your development of your tree plan. That way they're all in one area so everybody understands what we're looking for. We included more BMPs and updated plan details so they reflect what the ordinance is requiring. We updated lists for parking lot trees and street trees, screening trees, trees under utilities, and undesirable and invasive species lists. So you can go to this technical standards, you can look at these different lists and say, I need parking lot trees, and we have a list of trees that would be suitable for that kind of environment. You need a street tree, you can go to the list and see what kind of tree is appropriate for plantings along the street. And the last thing is we do provide a tree care prescription template. So a developer runs into an encroachment on a specimen tree or an existing tree, and they want to count that tree towards density. We provide them the ability to have a template for tree care maintenance so they can handle that during plan review. And these are just examples of the updated technical details. With this request, there are some scheduled fee changes that probably need to be made. The current fee schedule is the rezoning and arborist review fee for a rezoning is $500. If you came in outside of a rezoning, your arborist plan review fee is $100. But the arborist does plan review, pre-construction visit, pre-landscape meeting with the landscaper. The pre-construction visit is to deal with the installation of the tree fencing. The pre-landscaping visit is to go over how you plant the trees on site, and then we do inspect the installation of those trees. So we make sure the wire baskets are removed, any guy wires or installation of tree supports, how they're installed, and we verify the number of trees that are required to be planted on site are there. With this proposed fee change, or these proposed changes. I'm proposing to leave the rezoning fee the same. The arborist plan review and inspections for the developer to cover the cost of the actual arborist going out to the site and all the visits associated with that to $300. So that's basically a review, and then the two site visits, and then the city will pretty much pick up the inspections. The tree removal permit would be $100, and a commercial tree removal permit, $200. And that's identifying that with these proposed changes, there's going to be increased requirements to have the arborist do additional work for us. So he's a contract arborist. We set aside a certain amount every year to pay for him. With this requirement, if we're going to require residents to get a removal permit and require all these additional things, we gotta be able to have him compensated appropriately for that. The path moving forward, September 18th, we had the presentation to the tree board. October 14th is obviously the first public hearing and the presentation to you all. We plan on taking this to the mayor and council in the CAL meeting so they can hear this before we get in front of them and provide them an opportunity if they want to table it to do that as well if they need to. And then we got it scheduled for their final hearing and final vote on November 18th. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I'd like to open the floor. Any questions from Mr. Martin, please?
Yes, Ms.
Questions. First, this is a lot to digest in one night. You know, I get confused right off the bat. On page 2, you're singling out just single-family residentials and duplexes, but then on page 3, it seems like it's changing that. So commercial developers like, you know, the public shopping center, Jonquil Plaza, they had to follow on to these same guidelines?
What slide are you talking to so I can
Well, where it says the current is ordinance to single-family residence and duplex lots,
Yes.
24 inches or over. They need a permit.
Right.
And so on page 3, you're saying they're exempt? The first line in red?
When you're saying page 3,
Oh, well, the printout that you gave
no.
us.
Slow. Yeah, what
It'd be
slide?
slide 5.
Okay. No, that is just identifying. Is that the slide you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. So the items highlighted in red were the items that is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
And that's the issue the tree board wanted to address. Down on slide 6, I'm just telling you, this is the section of the code it's being addressed. The first bullet point is how it's currently addressed, and the second is what the proposed change is.
And so these fees that are going to be passed on to developers, so we currently have a tree, you know, you submit your site plan with your house location and everything, and there's identified trees that have to be removed in that site location. These are going to be additional fees placed in that where the house is located?
So you're talking about a new house or, okay. So if you're under the current ordinance, if you came in to pull a new home permit, you would provide a house location plan and it would show the location of your house, and that would typically be on a survey, and it would identify the tree locations and everything else. If the limits of disturbance that you need to build that house is under 50% of the total lot acreage, then you're exempt from the ordinance. So you bring that into the office, and we look at the limits of disturbance and it's under 50%, you're exempt from it. So we're just reviewing it based on the zoning ordinance and the building chief building official's requirements for, flooring and roofing and all that other stuff. So under today's ordinance, if you're under 50%, then there's no fee requirements. There's no review by our city arborist at that point.
Okay, I'm going to kind of use my house as an example. My house is almost 60 years old. We have 3 trees in our backyard that are massive. They would go over the 100 inch. But if we're going to put a new development in there that reflects what's going on around the rest of it, then those 3 trees would have to come down. I mean, the developer would probably have like $20,000 in tree removal because they're enormous. Then he would still have to pay the penalties for
No.
taking them down?
No.
Because I have no other trees, so I'm
No,
past
that would-
50%.
There's 2 separate issues. The first requirement is for, if you were living in the house and you wanted to remove a healthy.
No, I'm saying if I were to sell.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to address
Yeah.
both issues.
Okay.
Because they're separated and you're blending them together.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
lot to
so-
take in.
So the first issue is if you own the house and you want to remove one of those 30-inch trees, right, to build whatever. If it's a 30-inch tree and you want to remove it, yes, you would be required to get a tree removal permit. Okay? And yes, that would be the $100 on top of, that would be the $100 tree removal fee and then replacing it with a 2-inch caliber tree.
Right.
If you sold the lot and the developer wanted to develop your lot with a new house on it, under the new ordinance, they would submit the plan review fee to review the tree plan, because they would have to develop a tree plan which would survey the site, identify all the existing trees, assess the specimen trees, and then they would have to calculate if they met the density requirements with the existing trees on site. And then if they didn't, they would have to replace that deficiency of whatever the minimum is. And then they would have to recompense up to 50, since your lot would be under an acre, they would be capped at 50 inches per your development. The development process is different from a tree removal process.
Gotcha.
So they have to meet minimum requirements to replenish the site. Tree removal process, you take the tree down, you put 1 2-inch caliber tree back on the site.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a
Yeah,
question.
Mr. By.
On the penalty or the remedy, if somebody is a developer is out of compliance, I think I understood the new change would go from the current penalty, which is a fairly significant penalty, to this would be simply a misdemeanor with the potential of up to $1,000 or even some jail time. If I'm a developer and I'm looking at $15,000 or $20,000 of costs to stay in compliance with the ordinance, if I'm going to make a business decision, what would prevent me from just saying, let me just pay that $1,000 fine?
Pay the $1,000 fine for.
Yeah, you'd cite me, and I'll pay a $1,000 fine.
Meaning
rather than-
you don't want to replant trees back on site?
I'm a developer, and I'm trying to do this as cheaply as I can. It's going to cost me $15
Oh,
grand
we
to be in
won't give you your
compliance.
CO.
Pardon me?
We won't give you your CO. Which, it was an amendment to the ordinance, but it's already existing in the ordinance today.
Okay.
So,
I'm just thinking practically.
So practically speaking, if we went out and said, you're in violation of the ordinance and you don't want to come into compliance, we would issue you the citation, take you to court, and if you continued and you didn't want to comply, then we would withhold the CO for the house, the certificate of occupancy for the house, which is available today under the code.
All right, that answers the question, thank you, because that's a practical concern. A real-world scenario, much like Sherry's, and the real world happened to affect me. Single-family home, trees that have been planted 10, 12 years ago. They're now impinging upon each other. A specimen tree, a cherry tree. The requirement is 10 inches, so it's over 10 inches. So therefore, it's my understanding I would have to get a permit to bring it down. My concern is the aesthetics of the two trees growing together. One or both of them have to be severely pruned to potentially save the lives of one or both of those trees. By taking one down, I could be saving the life of another tree. But in order to do that, I've got to go through fees and approvals and that sort of thing.
If you don't have a development permit and the tree's not over 24 inches, then it's not an issue. If it's a cherry tree, you can.
Cherry is, I thought the cherry was one that was 10 inches.
Yeah, but the tree removal permit is for trees over 24 inches in size.
No matter the species.
Doesn't matter the species.
So if it's under 24 inches and I want to save my maple tree, I can take down my cherry tree to do that without a permit.
Yes, if the trees are under 24 inches.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Martin?
Mr. Martin, besides the 26 meetings that you've had over the last 12 months, how many of them have you had public involvement? I don't know, more than these folks that are here tonight, or is this the first public hearing you've had on this?
Well, all the meetings are open to the public and they're all posted. So when we have a tree board meeting and all that, it's all posted. We invited whoever wanted to come out to Bronner Hall back in September of 2018 to attend a meeting and a discussion on the tree ordinance and everything else. But formally, this document, first time it's been presented to the public, yes, this is the first time.
I just find, I mean, we got it Thursday, and it's 8 pages, and we've just spent almost an hour reviewing it, and we, as a board member, there's a lot of questions here. I just taking it back to my ward, and, you know, showing some of my neighbors that we're not going to find people for trees. I need a little bit more time to explain that to them and say this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. I'm not sure I've digested enough of this and had my question answered in order to vote on it tonight.
That's fine. That's this board's prerogative. If y'all want to table it, you're more than welcome to do so. I mean,
Well,
here's the issue. I have a directive from mayor and council we're directed to address this, and we put the effort in to provide it to you all. We've provided the document to you. I mean, if we included the public at large at every step along the way, there would be no movement on anything. So we got a committee together. We addressed the concerns of the committee and the tree board, which the tree board is representative of the city at large. Mayor and council appoint the board members to the board.
Right.
So we have submitted it to y'all. We've tried to address the tree board's concerns and tried to address staff's concerns, and we're putting it out there. If it takes 6 months to get approved, so be it. If it never gets approved, so be it.
Rusty, what happens if it gets tabled? It doesn't go before city council?
stays
correct?
off their agenda.
It just
until
stays off
passes.
their agenda. It's fine. Whenever it gets there, it gets
Let me
there.
just make sure I understand. We have had public hearings equaling about 60 hours of public hearings on this. They've been posted, they've been out, they've been available to the public, and all of that. If we vote on this, up or down, it still goes to city council today, correct? Or next month?
No, well, if you table it, it'll come back before whenever you table it to. If you
we
make
vote on
action
it.
on it, then yes, it would go to mayor and it's scheduled to go on the 18th.
And so that's more than a month away from now, today.
Yes, sir.
So we've had 60 hours of public hearing. We've got another month for people to review, digest, communicate with their constituents, and talk to their city council people, and make their case yay or nay for it over the next month. this has been in negotiation for a year. It's had members of all communities who've participated in the process. We've had builders, we've had people from the tree board, we've had arborists, we've had all kinds of, I don't remember anything, I haven't been here that long.
Yeah.
But in all my time on P&Z, I don't remember anything coming before us that have this amount of public review and negotiation in my tenure of just under 2 years.
I mean, I'm gonna be,
All right. We need to hear from the public as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The committee went back and forth on all these issues. So there may be a handful of issues, two, maybe three issues that there was unanimous decision on. There was a lot of issues that were split vote issues. So you're talking 4-3 type issues. So I don't think anyone is under the delusion that it was probably just going to sail through and be an easy task. If it takes time to move it and takes time for the public to address it, then I think that's fine. I think in the end, if everyone makes a statement on it and the council feels comfortable dealing with it, then they'll deal with it. If they want to wait till the next council.
But we
to
fully
address it.
have the opportunity to vote no and recommend denial, correct?
You can do whatever you want.
Okay.
All right.
Joel, I'm sorry. I want to say one
Yeah, go
quick
ahead.
thing. Next month will be my second year on council or on P&Z. I was on tree board before that, and we started talking about it when I was on the tree board. This has been a topic of discussion and something that has been set as a goal, and I'm really proud of what they've come together with. It's a big document, and it's a lot of important information. So,
Thank you, Tom. All right, thank you, Mr. Martin. At this time, we'd like to ask if there's anybody in attendance that would like to come forward and speak in favor of or opposition to this code amendment to the city's tree ordinance. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. I'm Kate Connor, and I live at 3700 Lee Street, and I'm also the president of the tree board. I'm fully in support of the document. As Tom said, I took over as chair whatever the title is, for the tree board after he left, and he sort of handed this process over to me, and I took that seriously. This was a year-long process, but it was much longer than that. The tree board members have been talking to mayor and council about this outside of the process, inside of the process. We've also are at every single Jonquil festival taking an input. I cannot tell you how many emails I receive from the public just because I'm listed on the website, and other tree board members may say the same thing. So I feel like we need to realize this has been an extensive process. We've had representation. So I do think people are going to have personal issues with it, whether it be, oh, I'm thinking of my own lot, my business. We have tried our best to think through every single scenario like that. We had developers at the table. We had residents at the table. We had developers who don't live in the city but do work in the city. So, yeah, I just think it's very confusing. I don't come from a tree background, a development background. I have learned a ton. We could spend a year longer talking about this to get everyone understanding. I think at some point we have to trust that we had an extensive process. We've been taking the feedback in and go with that. And the document we have is compromise from all sides. And so I'm very supportive of it.
Thank you, Ms. Connor, and thank you for your time working on it. It's a very time-consuming and often thankless position. So thank you for your volunteering. Any other comments? Come on. Good evening and welcome.
Hi, I'm Chris Weifel, 3289 Lee Street, 30080, Smyrna. I completely agree with Mr. Bai. This ordinance is long overdue, and Mr. Bartlett too. I'm in complete support that this ordinance should be voted on. I don't think it should be tabled. I think it needs to go to council. There has been plenty of public comment. I am not on the tree board. I came to the public meetings. I listened to what the ordinance was proposing. I made suggestions. I was there making public comment. There was other members of the public there too who aren't there tonight. So I feel like there's been plenty of time for the public to make statements. And yeah, I'll just say that I support the new ordinance, and I think you guys should vote on it tonight and send it to council.
Thank you for coming in. Welcome back, Mr. Martin.
Figured third time's a charm.
All right,
I mean, I
bring
came
it.
into the night to hear about a thing being built next to my house, and this is fun.
You never know what kind of enjoyment you're going to get at the old
You
planning
never
and
know.
zoning meeting.
Yeah, I guess point of clarity for Mr. Martin. Can I address him? Okay, sure. You said for tree removal for my yard, if it's a live tree, what becomes the definition of live versus dead, or branch falling, dead tree, dying tree? Where does that divide go?
Yeah, I mean, we've had discussion about it. I mean, if it's July and it's completely brown and dead, and just send in a picture, we're not going to charge you a permit fee removal. We'll just issue you a permit and go ahead and remove it, so anybody ever asks a question about it, well, you have the permit. There was no fee attached to it. Because there was no plan review or anything done with it. It's just a documentation that the tree was dead or dying.
Okay.
If you have a tree that may be diseased or some other kind of issue that we'll be happy to take whatever assessment from qualified professional that you want to provide. And if they deem it as that as well, then we'll run the same process and just issue a permit without charge.
The reason why I ask is because for the said property that's getting proposed next to my house, there are several trees there along that property line, right there next to my property line, which are on their property. However, on my property, there is a 36-inch oak that is 4 feet from the property line that will be within that critical root zone for that development. So are they required to give me tree protection or whatever it is? Or
So we didn't make any extensive changes to the boundary tree requirements. But if he is pulling a development permit and your tree is 36 inches in size and has more than 10% of the critical root zone on his property, then yes, he would have to provide boundary tree protections.
And that's 10% by length or by overall
Based on
circumference?
the circumference of not the circumference, but the radius from the tree.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any other comment from the public? Good evening and welcome.
Hi, I'm Jean Mankey, so I am the Ward 6 representative on the tree board, and I was in the work group. And I really want to thank the city. We really did collaborate very, very well. And I think I agree, Mr. Bai, that I think it's probably very unusual, and it really was a true collaboration, you know, between the committee and the specialists who worked from the arborist all the way to the landscape consultant. And I am, much like Kate, I learned a ton. And I come from a neighborhood, I come from Forest Hills, which everybody's heard us talk about this, but I have watched for like the last 2 years so many trees going down in Forest Hills. I mean, tree after tree, 7 acres of trees like gone in 3 days. And that's how I decided to get involved in the community. Instead of standing out on the street with my neighbors complaining, I thought, well, I'm going to be proactive and get involved in the tree committee. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are really concerned about the development of Smyrna and potential overdevelopment. And I think that Kate can probably agree that since there has been so much development going on, that there are a lot more citizens that are involved in coming to the tree board committee than there were probably in the past during your day. And so I just wanted the zoning committee to kind of consider that, and we really did look at every scenario. And I wanted to also add about the tree permit for removal. One of the reasons that we had pushed that from the board, tree board perspective, is Also trying to curb where tree cutting companies come in and they go down the street, like Tree Job, for instance, and they go from house to house to house to house and say, hey, I'm cutting a tree down the street. You got any trees in your yard you'd like taken down? And so we're trying to make people more aware of, you know, what it's all involved and how long those trees have been there, and, you know, to really try to protect the canopy. So, thanks.
Thank you very much for your time and your volunteering on the tree board. Ms. Martin.
Hello, Sean Martin. I reside at 2884 Anderson Circle. I will say I am in full support of this ordinance. From the moment that the group started working on it, 2 years is how long I've been on the tree board. The meetings have included a number of different stakeholders, from developers, lots of residents. Back when Ken was even on board, we had Caitlin and Rusty in attendance, and our city arborist as well. The discussions have been full, multifaceted, and I would say that I really believe that this just needs to be pushed forward. I'm going to go ahead and toot our horn on the Smyrna Tree Scarves project. It is a direct outcome of our concern for the trees here in Smyrna. And so in order to pitch the narrative correctly in preparation for the November meeting in front of the city mayor and council, I think that the educational component to let people know that we're not trying to get rid of the trees or make it easier for developers to come in and raise our lots, but instead educate them and to explain exactly how these different compromises took place so that we could come up with something that was great for everyone, a win-win for all. And so with that being said, I really, truly hope that you will consider moving forward on this.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Anybody else? Okay. The public comment is now closed on this item. Any other discussion from the panel?
Mr. Chairman, I have a concern because this month my city council resigned. So Ward 7 has no voice on this after tonight, unless, of course, there's, after the election, somebody's put in to hear that. And I'm very concerned about that. And I would also like to ask if the tree board or somebody could get this information to the city manager for her November newsletter to get more voices in here to hear and to explain this, or maybe have this read prior to November 18th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. Anybody else?
Well, I'd like to say that I feel like several of us on the board are the least educated on this ordinance revision that's been going on for over a year, and it is a lot to take in on the first, sit down and everything. I appreciate trees. I love trees. I just don't know how this impacts the community as with the, it's a new tax. Just like the lady said about the tree company going door to door saying, hey, we're in the neighborhood, then, little old lady down the street gets, stuck with some permits because she's not aware of this either, but this guy's knocking on doors. So it's just a lot of things going on for me to take it in this evening. But thank you for your input. Thank you for everything that you've done for us.
All right, anybody else? Okay. This item is something that I take very near and dear. And I don't believe that this is the pathway to go down. I simply believe that this is going to make it more cost prohibitive for people to do one-off construction projects, and it's going to destroy more of our canopy, not less of it. What this is going to do is it's going to encourage developers to come in and clear cut, because that's the only way that they can make it a financially viable opportunity. I'm a little bit upset that the volume of information, I got to applaud the tree board staff. I mean, this is a tremendous amount of information, but the fact that this is item H on our agenda is despicable. It should be item 1. Trees are very, very important to our community, and this should not be something that we're sitting around at 8:30 at the end of a meeting talking about. I think it's a policing issue. I hear permit fee, tree plan fee, tree preservation plan fee, tree recompense plan fee. This is another tax, and it's not been done well here. It's not presented well here to me. Now, with some proper time to spend on this item, maybe I get more comfortable with it. But the way that this is coming off to me tonight, I'm not comfortable with this at all. Again, this should not be an item at the end of an agenda. It should be an item at the top. There's 50,000 people that live in Smyrna, and by virtue of this list that's here, it appears that there's about 20 people that have been making these decisions. And I appreciate you bringing up that there are developers that don't live in this community, but I do live in this community, and I don't clear cut my lots. I work my butt off to save our canopy, but this item right here makes me want to go out tomorrow and cut down trees that I would not be cutting down because I don't want the fees associated with it. These decisions we make on the bottom of these agendas, they have a huge impact on our community. And I appreciate you guys' time. I really do. I just do not feel like this is an appropriate setting. This thing needs to be tabled until we get more information. But with that, I'll entertain a motion. Have a motion to approve, Mr. Bartlett.
A motion to approve code amendment to the city tree ordinance, chapter 106, vegetation, city of Smyrna.
Have a second, Mr. Monty Bai. Please vote. Can you do that again? Motion's approved 4-1. The last item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from September 9, 2019 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Are there any changes that need to be made at this time? Motion to approve, Mr. Bai. Second, Mr. Rice. Please vote. Minutes are approved 5-0. This meeting's called at 8:24.